My name is Lynn Abrams. My father, my father was very sick, and he had renal function, kidney failure, and my dad went into hospital. I think it was on the 8th of August, 2020. And during that time, the hospital, we were in continuous contact with the hospital. My father lives in Joburg, or lived in Joburg, and we on a regular basis spoke to the hospital, the doctors and the staff to find out how he's doing and what the situation was. And at that time we were told that my dad's kidney function is nearing its end stage, and the doctor explained to us that he has between 2 weeks or 2 months to live, and but it also depends on the person and the comorbidities. My father was a diabetic as well, and he had hypertension, and that. So we knew that my dad was not going to live that much longer, that he was not going to be with us for that much longer. And on the 21st of August, my father released himself from hospital. His complaints were that the treatment that he got in the public hospital wasn't that good, and the nursing staff, and that they didn't really care about him. And we tried to speak to him, to get him to stay in hospital, because we felt that he would have received better attention, better care, medical care in hospital. And us being in Joburg, it was quite difficult for us to then be there when he released himself from hospital. But on the 21st, he released himself from hospital. My sister, who lives in Joburg, my sister went and picked him up and took him straight to her place. He couldn't stay at his place because he was alone and wouldn't be able to take care of himself. So on the 25th of August, myself and my other two sisters flew down to Joburg. And us going down to Joburg was because we knew that he was dying, and we knew that if we didn't go then, the next call might be that he had passed on. So for us, it was really going down, ensuring that he was comfortable, that he was seen to, and that he had the things that he needed to be comfortable. So when we arrived on the 25th, my sister picked us up. We went straight to the home. When we got there, my dad was in the room. He had a heater on, and no windows. He had a thick blanket and heater, and it was in summer as well. And my sister was telling us that he's getting cold, and we just took it that that is probably because of the kidneys, and that his organs are busy shutting down, and that's maybe why he was getting cold. So that night we washed him. So my father didn't allow anyone to touch him. He only allowed me to wash him. We washed him. My sister cut his beard. We massaged his hands, and we really gave him the care. And we sat with him for hours, I think until 2 or 3 in the morning, just chatting and that. And he actually made us to promise that if anything happens to him, that we'll bring him to Cape Town to bury him in Cape Town. Now, none of us had on masks, because we all thought that we were safe, and we thought that my father was safe. COVID was not even on our minds at that time. The Thursday, my sister took him breakfast. She fed him. We changed his diapers, and we made him comfortable, and he slept for most of the day. So towards the evening, he called me and he asked me again for coffee, and I said, no, let me first wash you again, and then we'll give you coffee, so then you clean and you feel better. But that night, we realized that my father was losing blood, and we knew that because the doctors told us that he was losing blood. We just didn't understand where and how he was losing blood. So it turned out that he lost blood through his urine. So that night we changed him, we washed him. We were still busy with his feet and cutting his toenails and just putting some ointment on his feet and that. and then he said he wanted to go to the bathroom. So we kind of like tried to quickly assist him, but he couldn't contain it, and it just came. And then we realized that the blood was actually more red than anything else, and we advised him to go back to the hospital. So we called the ambulance, they came to fetch him, but it wasn't like, he didn't go back to the same hospital. He went to a different hospital because my sister lived in Boksburg. So when we got to the hospital, we followed the ambulance, and then he went to our memorial, Tambo Memorial in Boksburg. So we followed, and when we got to the hospital, he was there. They did the checks and checking his blood pressure. I mean, at home also, the ambulance checked. His diabetes were fine, his blood pressure were fine, his temperature was fine, everything was fine. And so the Saturday we went back to the hospital, and because we called first and we asked, should we bring diapers, is there anything that we can bring to make him more comfortable, pajamas, slippers and stuff. So we went to the hospital Saturday, and somebody said that he's in a COVID ward, and we were like, so why is he in a COVID ward? Because he didn't go in for COVID and COVID symptoms. He went in because he has kidney failure, and we know about his condition, we know what's happening to him, and we know that it's also towards the end, like the end of his journey. And they were explaining that it doesn't really matter, everyone who comes in, they do the COVID test, and only once the results come out, and then they separate people and that. So this ward 16 at Tamil Memorial was that kind of ward. So we couldn't see him, obviously, the Saturday morning. We could just drop the stuff that we took, clean clothing for him, and then my father was still there, so we could speak to him. We were in the passage, he was on the bed, the first bed as you came in, and he asked me if we're going home, and I said, no, we're not going back to Cape Town yet, but we'll come back. So the Monday morning, we were supposed to fly back to Cape Town the Monday evening. The Monday morning, I called the hospital and I said, can we please come in to say our goodbyes, because we know that we will get that call to say he's not there, he's not with us anymore, and we felt that we just wanted to say our goodbyes. So if anything should have happened, then we know we've done that. The hospital said, yes, we can come in provided that we wear PPE. And I mean, we could understood because of the ward, it was mixed people, you know, it doesn't matter whether you had kidney failure or whether you had COVID or whatever, everyone who came in had to be tested and they were put in that ward, so we understood that. So when we got to the hospital, they only gave us like the coats, like that you put on over your clothes. And I remember I had on my shield, and I had two masks. I had a cloth mask and I had a surgical mask over the cloth mask. So I was the first one to go in. When I went in, my father was on oxygen and he was breathing very, very heavily. But I mean, even that didn't, I mean, for us it wasn't like, we wouldn't disturb, could it be COVID or anything, because we knew the organs are shutting down, it impacts on the lungs and the breathing and the oxygen levels and all of that. So it was a normal kind of thing for us. It wasn't like, you know. And so I was with him and I called him. He woke up, he was sleeping, but he heard me, opened his eyes twice, and I prayed for him. And then the nurse came and she gave me gloves. And I was like, but why do I need gloves now? Because I mean, I'm done, you know. My sisters are coming in now. And then she said, oh, your dad's results just came in and your dad tested positive for COVID-19. And I was like, huh? But anyway, my sisters still went in, but they were like very short. I mean, and obviously they didn't touch him. They didn't touch anything or any, you know. I still see this picture of my father laying there. His top was like up till here. I still brought down his clothes, you know, tried to make him comfortable and playing and that. So after both my sisters went in the med hospital, the nurses said the doctor would like to speak to us. So we went outside and the doctor came and she said, like, you know, his results came in. There's nothing much that they can do. They can only make him comfortable. They're not worried about the COVID because they can give him the COVID cocktail. I don't know what that is, but they can give him a COVID cocktail. And they also said that they can only make him comfortable. And because we were now in direct contact with a COVID positive patient, it put us at risk as well. So that meant that we couldn't fly. So the doctor said they can give us a letter that we can email to the airline, the hospital letter basically stating that we were in direct contact with a COVID positive person, and because of that we couldn't fly. So she went inside to actually write the letter, and then she came out about 15 minutes later with the letters and also saying that your father's just passed away. It was unbelievable. I mean, we were just there. We just spoke to him. And now all of a sudden, my immediate reaction was to walk back into the hospital, back into the ward, and I just saw this green curtain that was around his bed. And I mean, and already, like, I had to be strong for my sisters, and they were like more crying and more emotional. I had to be strong at that particular point, asking questions and that. And then, so obviously our own, I mean, besides the pain and all of that, I'm a diabetic, I've got hypertension, and for me it was like, what now? Because now we are at risk, we've been exposed, what's going to happen? So your own anxieties, your own fear kicks in as well. But then, I mean, for a long time, I didn't believe that my father had COVID. And because it was like, you know, this emotions, death is painful, but when you have a layer of COVID over it, it makes it so uncertain, and you have all these questions. There's just a lot of uncertainty that comes with it. How could it be? We were just with him. He opened his eyes when I called him, and all of a sudden, 15 minutes later, they come out and say they need to make him comfortable, and then they come out and say that he's just passed on. It was that kind of reaction. I don't even know how to describe and explain, and maybe many people watching this would understand what I'm saying, because it's only when you go through this experience that you understand the uncertainty, the anger, the frustration, the emotions that comes with a COVID death. Because I mean, my father went in for kidney failure, he dies of COVID. It's like, you know, I mean, I even took to Facebook and I asked, and I did a bit of research asking people, do hospitals get paid when they do this COVID test, or if somebody dies of COVID? And a lot of people had a lot of comments or responses to my question, but people didn't understand where my questions came from and the uncertainty that brought that. And it was only later on that we've established that, yes, that night that he went in on the 27th, he was tested. And so his test results arrived at the lab the next day, the 28th, the lab got his results. And 3 days later, at that time there was a 72-hour waiting period. So 3 days later, his test results came out, and that is exactly the Monday morning when we went in. And to some extent that brought some kind of closure for me. But then in organizing, and now what now? Because now we need to bury my father. You know, it was also, I mean, we didn't understand, we didn't know. Do you cremate? Do you bury the person, or what the situation was? I mean, at first, we asked the doctor, so what do people do? Do they cremate or whatever? But eventually we decided to bury my father, and he made us promise. We made a promise to him that we will bury him in Cape Town. So we got an undertaker from Cape Town to come down to fetch the body. The undertaker came the Thursday. The undertaker arrived in Joburg. He went to the hospital mortuary, took my father, went to Home Affairs and did all the paperwork, and then he took the body back to Cape Town. Now, you know, what still amazes me is that with my sister, it was the three of us, the three sisters who came from Cape Town. It was my sister, her friend and a child, and my dad in the same house. And my brothers came and visited every day, and none of us tested positive. Or maybe we were, maybe we were positive, we don't know. I mean, I took all these kinds of vitamins and stuff. I flew to Joburg with my honey and my ginger and my lemon and my garlic, and then obviously the vitamin Maxi C, all these vitamins, B complex, and all of that. I mean, I've just taken them throughout the period. So we don't know. I mean, I had a bit of a headache during that time. I don't know. I didn't test to see whether I tested positive or not. We couldn't go. So the undertaker, so the body went to Cape Town the Friday. Obviously, we couldn't fly because the airline's policy was that you had to wait 14 days and that you had to do another test to prove that you are COVID negative. And then what it meant for us was to get somebody from Cape Town to come with a car, take my sister's car, drive to Joburg, and then we had to wait 5 to 6 days before we could actually, because we were in quarantine, so we had to wait 5 to 6 days before we could drive back. So the Saturday morning we actually drove back because my father's body was there, and we had to go back to Cape Town because we needed to make arrangements to bury my father. So we couldn't wait for 14 days. Surprisingly, or I don't even know what to call it, whether it's God's grace or what it was, none of us tested positive, but the undertaker who came to fetch my father and the guy who came with him, both of them tested positive for COVID. And that to us was a surprise because, I mean, you expect us who had close contact over, I mean, for us it was 2 days, my sister for longer, we had close contact, but none of us tested positive, but the undertaker who came to fetch him tested positive. So, yeah, we went back to Cape Town when we organized the funeral. And I think at that time there wasn't as many restrictions in terms of how funerals are conducted, because our experience of the funeral was different to others. Yes, we needed 50 people, and yes, it was difficult to decide who that 50 people are that attends the funeral. It's not easy when you come from, especially because there's two families. It's my mother's family, it's my father's family. And then there's us and our children who are already 9, no, we were 12 or something like that. But I mean, it was difficult for us to make that decision. But fortunately, we could carry the coffin because for us it was clear. There are certain traditions when it comes to funerals. Things that we've been accustomed to, that the way that we do things, you know, and that is what I suppose what we call, we bury our loved ones with dignity. And that was the last, like, I mean, we couldn't carry him, we couldn't put on a suit or anything for him. You know, we couldn't do those things. I mean, we didn't even see the body. We actually asked the undertaker, how do we know? How do you know? Although we sent the picture to him, but how do you know this was the right body? How do we know that we didn't bury somebody else? And I suppose to a large extent, we just have to go with what the undertaker told us, that he made sure he looked at the picture and that was my dad. So we also know in that, so there's always that level of uncertainty will always be there. And for me, I mean, and then the funeral happened and we could carry the coffin. Yes, we had to wear gloves, and immediately dispose of the gloves. We had the coffin in the church. It wasn't wrapped in plastic at that time, so we could bury him in a way that we felt was dignified to him. But, you know, for me, I struggled for a very long time. In fact, I still do. I don't think that I've ever been able to mourn in the way that I should have. Because the only thing that went through my mind the whole time, my dad's body was wrapped in a plastic. And he was put in that plastic, naked, wrapped in plastic, and then put in a coffin, and then put in a hole. It's that picture that is continuously with me, you know, and because, you always think, what if the person was still alive and they just took the body and wrapped it in plastic? It's those kinds of things that makes a COVID death, I suppose, more painful, and it makes the mourning process so much more painful, I suppose, devastating, traumatic. I don't know, but for me, that is how I've experienced it. And the pictures, it's still there, although I didn't see the body wrapped in plastic. But when I think of my dad, it's what I think of. And I suppose that's why we, at funerals, we open the coffin and we are able to dress up the person and do certain things so that we remember in that way. But my remembering of him is that plastics that they wrap the bodies in. So that was the painful process to me. So yeah, I think that's my story.